Willow Creek was a manicured illusion. Streets lined with symmetrical hedges, clapboard houses in regulation pastels, and neighbors who smiled with the practiced ease of people who followed rules because they feared what happened when they didn't. It was the sort of place that promised safety through conformity, a neighborhood governed not by mutual respect, but by a draconian homeowners association that cloaked tyranny in bureaucracy. I bought the corner lot for its vantage. 2 stories with high windows, a wraparound porch, and a reinforced foundation, features not listed on the flyer, but obvious to someone trained to see advantages. I was done with deployments, but the habit of assessing every angle hadn't left me. Neither had the instincts. My name is Cole Hunter, former Navy SEAL. And I didn't move to Willow Creek for tranquility. I moved here to disappear. The first few days passed without incident. I walked Reaper, my jet-black Belgian Malinois, every morning at 0600. We kept to ourselves. I repainted the mailbox, fixed a few structural issues the previous owner neglected, and quietly ignored the stack of HOA welcome packets that showed up on my doorstep, each one more aggressive in tone than the last. That's when I met her. Judith Reynolds, though everyone called her Karen, and not just behind her back. She embodied the stereotype with chilling perfection. Hair cut in a precise bob, oversized sunglasses that masked her eyes but not her contempt, and a clipboard glued to her palm like a weapon of war. She ran the HOA with the zeal of a tyrant guarding a fragile empire. Her second-in-command was Officer Rick Monroe, a neighborhood cop with a buzz cut, a chest full of swagger, and the barely concealed aggression of someone who'd found power too intoxicating to handle. He lived 2 doors down and treated his badge like a royal seal, enforcing HOA rules as if they were state law. They knocked on my door one Saturday morning uninvited. Reaper growled low behind me as I opened it. "Mr. Hunter," Karen began, her tone more command than greeting. "You're in violation of Code 12A, mailbox color, and 14B, unapproved modifications to your back deck." Rick stood slightly behind her, hand resting near his belt, posture deliberately intimidating. I met their eyes one at a time. "Is that so?" "These are community standards, sir," Karen said, her voice gratingly polite. "You signed a binding agreement when you purchased this home." "Actually," I said, keeping my tone measured, "I purchased through a trust that exploited a loophole in your association charter. I'm not technically a member." Karen's mouth twitched. "Whether or not you consider yourself bound, the rest of us live here too," Rick said, stepping forward. "Then I suggest you do it peacefully," I replied, and shut the door in their faces. I watched through the peephole as they lingered on the porch. Rick muttered something to Karen, who looked like she was chewing nails. They left eventually, but I knew this wasn't over. Over the following weeks, the war began, not with gunfire, but with citations. A letter arrived every other day. My grass was 1/4 inch too long. A garden gnome was labeled an unauthorized fixture. One time, I returned home to find a warning taped to my garage door about a military-looking antenna on my roof. It was a standard ham radio receiver. I ignored them, but I didn't relax. I checked my perimeter nightly. Reaper slept by the door. Cameras, discreet and encrypted, covered every angle. I logged every citation, every encounter. Not because I was afraid. Because I knew this wasn't about rules. It was about control. One afternoon, I caught Rick parked across the street, watching my house. He didn't flinch when I approached, just smiled. "Keeping an eye on the neighborhood," he said casually. "Funny," I said. "There's been a rise in property crime on the West End. Maybe you're watching the wrong house." His smile widened. "Or maybe I'm just making sure certain residents don't think they're above the law." We stared each other down. I saw the flicker in his eyes, that insecurity wrapped in bravado. He wasn't here to protect anyone. He was here to provoke. That night, someone slashed my tires. I didn't report it. I replaced them myself before sunrise. A week later, I returned from a training hike just before midnight. As I approached my door, I noticed something off. The porch light was on, but I always left it off. Reaper bristled beside me, a low growl vibrating from his throat. Someone was inside. I drew my sidearm and moved to the side window. Sure enough, a silhouette moved across the living room. I flanked around back, Reaper at my heel, and slipped inside through a side entrance, known only to me. The intruder was standing in the foyer, struggling with a brass key. Officer Monroe. He looked up, startled, hand dropping the key as he registered me. Your door was locked. Karen said to check on a leak. Emergency access. HOA master key should have worked. I stepped into the light, gun lowered but ready. You have no legal authority to enter this property. Not as a cop. Not as a neighbor. Not as Karen's lapdog. Rick stiffened, his hand creeping toward his holster.
Don't, I said. My voice was calm.
Not loud, but unmistakably final. His hand froze. A tremor of uncertainty passed through him. You planning to shoot me? He asked. I don't need to, I replied. You're already finished. He backed up, hands raised slightly, and made for the door. Karen was outside, pacing. Everything okay in there, Rick? She called. He didn't answer. Just shoved past her. I stepped onto the porch, weapon holstered now, but eyes locked on hers. You break into my house again. Next time I call the real law, I said. Karen's voice wavered. We were only trying to ensure the safety of the community. Then stay out of my home. They left, but the line had been drawn. Inside, Reaper sat at attention, eyes alert, body still. I knelt beside him and scratched behind his ears. We're not in Kandahar anymore, I murmured. But the rules haven't changed. Outside, the street was still. But peace in Willow Creek was a lie. And I had just declared war. 2 days after the break-in, I changed every lock in the house. Deadbolts, digital security, the works. I added reinforced strike plates and repositioned my indoor security cameras for better coverage. Monroe's face was now permanently tagged in the system. Karen's too. But if they thought I'd retreat, they didn't understand who I was. You don't get through 5 tours without learning how to win battles before they're fought. The next move would be theirs, I just needed to wait. Sure enough, it came. I returned from the hardware store late one afternoon to find an official-looking envelope wedged into my mailbox. It was stamped with the HOA's insignia, a mocking little tree lined by pastel houses. Inside was a formal complaint citing my aggressive demeanor and refusal to cooperate with neighborhood safety protocols. I was ordered to appear before a special committee. I almost laughed. But I went. The meeting was held in the clubhouse. Karen sat at the head of a long oak table like a queen presiding over court. To her left was a lawyer in an ill-fitting suit. To her right, Rick Monroe, wearing his uniform like armor. I arrived in jeans and a black tee, no weapons, no folder. Just my phone in my pocket recording everything. Mr. Hunter, Karen began. We've reviewed your behavior over the last month and are deeply concerned. About what? Being broken into by your little sidekick here. Karen frowned. That incident was investigated internally. Officer Monroe believed your property was in danger. He had no warrant, no cause, and no right to use a master key that shouldn't exist in the first place. The lawyer cleared his throat. The HOA is empowered to enter residences in emergencies. Your bylaws don't override state law. I tapped my phone and played the recording, Rick fumbling with a key, my voice warning him, Karen's voice from the porch. The room went still. Rick's face turned red. You recorded me without consent. Perfectly legal in this state, I said. Especially when done inside my home. Karen leaned forward, trying to regain control. Mr. Hunter, this hostility is exactly why the HOA has concerns. This hostility, I said, standing, is the result of your abuse of power. You've turned a peaceful neighborhood into a surveillance state. But you made one mistake. You picked the wrong house. I left them there, stunned, and walked out. But I wasn't done. That night, I compiled every piece of evidence, video clips, voice memos, timestamp citations, and sent them to a civil rights attorney I knew from my deployment days. I also forwarded everything to a journalist friend who ran an exposé blog. I didn't want to blow things up yet, but I was ready to. Over the next few days, Karen's tactics escalated. An inspector showed up unannounced to condemn my back deck. Claimed a neighbor reported instability. I handed him the structural engineer's report I'd commissioned a month prior. He backed down fast. Rick tried another approach, this time citing me for unsecured pets. Reaper was always on a leash, always under control. I showed him the footage. He didn't even argue. Just glared. They were testing me, but I wasn't going anywhere. On a stormy Wednesday night, as thunder cracked above Willow Creek, someone rang my doorbell. I opened it to find a note pinned to the post with a kitchen knife. It read, "Leave. Before you're made to." I didn't call the police. I didn't call Karen. I turned to Reaper and said, "Time to wake the neighbors." The next morning, I walked door to door, calmly sharing everything: videos, recordings, printed documents. I didn't plead. I didn't campaign. I just told the truth. And it worked. 2 residents admitted they'd had similar experiences with the HOA. One even confessed that Rick had threatened his teenage son over a parked bicycle. The tide was turning, but it wasn't over yet. As I stood on my porch that evening, Reaper at my side, I saw Karen and Rick huddled at the end of the street. They were planning something, and I was ready. 3 days after the knife note, the neighborhood began to fracture. A group of residents formed an informal coalition. They called it the Willow Creek Independent Committee. What started as private conversations on front lawns turned into organized meetings in garages, away from HOA surveillance. I didn't lead them. I didn't even speak unless asked. But I showed them everything. And that was enough. Karen responded like any cornered bureaucrat, with policy. She doubled down on enforcement. Notices about lawn heights, garbage bins, and carport colors flowed like water. She tried to bury the rebellion in paperwork. Rick followed suit, issuing veiled warnings during his patrols. But fewer people opened their doors when he knocked now. The fear was fading. Until the day I caught him on my property again. It was 4 a.m. Reaper stirred first. I was already awake, an instinct that never dulled. The back motion camera pinged, and within seconds, I saw Rick creeping around my detached garage. This time, I didn't confront him. I let him try the door. He tugged once, twice. Then pulled something from his pocket, a lockpick. I waited until he inserted it, then stepped out silently, the safety of my sidearm off but finger outside the trigger guard. "You've got 5 seconds to explain yourself." Rick spun, startled, hand halfway to his own weapon. "Stop," I snapped. "Hand away. Now." He froze. "This is private property. You're trespassing, again. You're carrying an illegal entry tool. You're armed. Give me one reason not to disarm and detain you." "You can't detain me," he hissed. "I can and I will. Citizens' arrest statutes apply. And I have video of everything." He glanced toward the street. Empty. No witnesses. He looked back at me, realizing the same thing I had weeks ago. This wasn't about houses anymore. This was personal. Karen said. Karen doesn't issue laws. She barks orders to people too weak to question them. Are you one of them, Rick? Or are you just desperate enough to break into my house again because your ego can't take the hit? He said nothing. You're done, I said. Next time you come near this property, I press charges. And I'll have every news outlet in the county playing your body cam footage with my video right beside it. I let him walk away, but not before I saw the flicker in his eye. He wasn't done. Not yet. Later that morning, I found a summons taped to my door. HOA emergency meeting. Motion to expel resident coal hunter. It was absurd. They had no legal authority to evict me. But they didn't need the law. They were banking on optics, community pressure, isolation. Karen's favorite game. I went anyway. The clubhouse was packed. Karen sat at the center table with her signature clipboard and cold smile. Rick stood near the door, arms crossed, posture military, his own private message to me. We'll make this brief, Karen announced. Mr. Hunter has continuously disrupted our peaceful community with aggressive conduct and failure to comply with HOA standards. We're voting on a motion to recommend his removal. A few people in the room looked uncomfortable. One woman raised a hand timidly. Is that even legal? He owns his home. Karen cut her off. This is a private community. We have the right to protect our residents. I stepped forward. You don't have the right to frame someone with doctor complaints. You don't have the right to use HOA funds to harass homeowners. You don't have the right to send a man with a gun into my home. Gasps fluttered around the room. Let me show you something, I continued. I tapped my phone. The screen behind the HOA board lit up with security footage. Rick trying to pick my garage lock at 4 a.m. Then, audio of Karen's voice from our first encounter. We were only trying to ensure the safety of the community. Karen shot out of her chair. This is inadmissible. You have no authority. No, I said, cutting her off. What I have is the truth. And enough evidence to file a civil suit against both of you.
And I will.
Unless this ends. Tonight. Silence hung in the air like smoke. An elderly man near the back stood. I vote no on the motion. One by one, others followed. Karen's motion failed. But Rick wasn't done. As the room emptied, he cornered me near the exit. You think this is over? I didn't flinch. You should be worried about your badge. Because tomorrow morning, the sheriff's office will have everything I showed this room. And more. His jaw tightened. Then he did the one thing I didn't expect. He drew his gun.
Point blank.
No hesitation. Everything slowed. Reaper lunged, knocking his arms sideways. The shot fired, loud, deafening, into the ceiling. People screamed. Rick fell back, Reaper on top of him, teeth bared. I yanked Reaper off and kicked Rick's gun away. He lay on the floor, gasping. Karen stood at the door, pale, trembling. I looked right at her. You empowered this. This is your fault. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called 911.
Good.
The real law was finally on its way. The police arrived in under 3 minutes. I stood with my hands visible, gun holstered, Reaper leashed, and calm beside me. Rick was disarmed and prone, still in shock, Karen pacing like a cornered animal. Deputies secured the scene with speed and confidence. The lead officer, Sergeant Wilkins, recognized Rick instantly. You again, he muttered. Within minutes, Rick was in handcuffs. His rights were read, his weapon bagged, and his protests fell on deaf ears. Karen, however, tried to intervene. He was acting in his capacity as HOA security. You can't arrest him for that. Wilkins gave her a long, tired look. He drew a weapon without provocation in a public meeting against a homeowner with documented grievances. He's lucky no one was shot. You're lucky. Karen stepped back, lips tight, eyes darting. I handed over my footage. Multiple angles, timestamps, audio logs. My prep work paid off. Wilkins's expression hardened with every clip he watched. Mr. Hunter, he said finally, we'll need a formal statement. And I think the district attorney will want to speak with you. I nodded. They took Rick away. The clubhouse slowly emptied. Residents lingered outside, whispering in small clusters. Some avoided my gaze. Others offered nods of silent respect. Karen vanished without a word. The next morning, the sheriff's department issued a press release. Rick was under investigation for attempted aggravated assault, misuse of authority, and criminal trespass. HOA involvement was noted. By evening, news crews had descended on Willow Creek. The story went viral. Ex-cop turned HOA enforcer tries to break into Navy SEAL's home, pulls gun at public meeting. The irony was irresistible to media outlets. Karen tried damage control. In a last-ditch effort, she circulated a neighborhood letter blaming social media hysteria and militant newcomers for disrupting Willow Creek's order. It was pathetic. No one bought it. At the next HOA election, Karen was voted out in a landslide. 3 board members resigned. The remaining 2 offered me the vacant seat. I declined. I hadn't fought this war to become part of their system. I just wanted peace. Instead, I nominated a quiet single mom named Elise who had attended every meeting and taken notes like her life depended on it. She won unanimously. 2 weeks later, I got a visit.
Karen.
She stood on my porch, out of uniform, her face drawn and brittle. No clipboard. No entourage. I'm not here to argue, she said. Good, I replied, arms folded. She looked past me, toward Reaper lounging on the porch. He's trained. Not just obedience. Combat. You broke into my house, Karen.
Twice.
Rick pulled a gun on me. That's not HOA enforcement. That's war. Her eyes flickered. You're military.
SEAL.
Retired. But not helpless. You assumed you had control. You assumed the neighborhood owed you something. It doesn't. It never did. She didn't argue. I lost everything, she said quietly. My position. My pension. The HOA's suing me to cover legal costs. Actions have consequences. You crossed a line. She nodded slowly. I didn't expect resistance. Not from someone like you. That was your first mistake. A long silence settled between us. I came to say I'm sorry, she said finally. I didn't reply. She left without another word. Peace, like war, is earned. And sometimes it's silent. In the months that followed, Willow Creek changed. The HOA revised its charter, stripping it of enforcement privileges, rewriting bylaws to require resident votes on all new rules, banning private security. A new culture emerged. One of community, not control. I kept to myself.
Built a garden.
Helped Elise with a neighborhood watch program that didn't involve guns or intimidation. Trained Reaper at dawn. Drank coffee in silence. But people talked. Asked me to teach self-defense classes. Offered beers, invitations, small gestures of thanks. One by one, walls came down. I never wanted to be a hero. I wanted solitude. But peace, I realized, sometimes requires standing up to those who mistake power for purpose. And when you do, it spreads.